All right. Great morning, everyone. And thank you for coming on to be a part of this morning's daily directive. I have a little bit of a different approach for you, but it's going to be a blessing to you. God bless all of you as you come on. Thank you for joining in, and also share this with your followers and friends. Let's get this daily directive mandate out. Thank you for your support in helping to push this agenda and get it moving, building some momentum here. Blessings to all of you. All right. God bless you. Thank you so much once again for being a part of this platform. Appreciate it. I'm going to teach a little bit this morning and then give you some points of reference. This morning, I'm going to talk a little bit about the spirit of Python, and I want to tie it into the mandate of prayer. Of course, this is also founded upon some principles of spiritual warfare, but it's going to bless you this morning and really shed some light concerning perhaps maybe some challenges you've had in prayer or a strategy to help you overcome some potential impasses that you've noticed threatening your just long-term trajectory as it relates to your mandate to intercede. So very quickly, let's go to Acts chapter 16. Acts chapter 16, verses 16 through 18. And then we'll look at verses 25 through 29. I did a teaching on this years ago, and I believe it's on YouTube, but I want to re-emphasize it again. Acts 16, verses 16 through 18, and then verses 25 through 29. And it came to pass as we went to prayer, a certain damsel possessed with the spirit of divination met us, which brought her masters much gain by soothsaying. The same followed Paul and us, and cried, saying, These men are servants of the Most High God, which show unto us the way of salvation. And this did she many days. But Paul, being grieved, turned and said to the spirit, I command thee in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And he, notice how this spirit is given a personality, he being a pronoun, and he came out of her, came out the same hour. And then in verse 25, it reads, And at midnight, Paul and Silas prayed and sang praises unto God, and the prisoners heard them. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were open, and everyone's bands were loose. And the keeper of the prison, awaking out of his sleep and seeing the prison doors open, he drew out his sword and would have killed himself, supposing that the prisoners had been fled. But Paul cried with a loud voice, saying, Do thyself no harm, for we are all here. Then he called for light and sprang in and came trembling and fell down before Paul and Silas. Now, these verses are interesting and very powerful as it relates to just this assignment where the spirit of Python has really entangled itself around so many well-to-do believers in the place of prayer and actually prohibiting them from fulfilling their mandate unbeknownst to them. There are a lot of people who really don't understand sometimes the oppositions and the deployments of darkness to impede your progression, maturity, and overall development in that place of prayer. And when you don't know what you're dealing with, it makes it even equally indifferent. And so God has a way of really bringing certain truths to light through the scriptures. And I'm going to build on this morning to really bless and encourage you. So let's look at this. Notice how Paul and Silas, the principle of God sends us out two by two. They're headed to prayer, and then they're met with a young lady who is possessed with the spirit of divination. And the divination was being used to increase the substance of the individuals that this child was joined to. And interestingly, I'm just working on something here real quick. Interestingly, Paul and Silas were under the assault of a demon spirit. And initially, they were not even aware of it because what the child was saying was true. But the information was being proclaimed by an illegal source. In other words, she followed them and she cried, saying, These men are servants of the Most High God. They show us the way of salvation. And she did it many days. But Paul being grieved, why would that bring grief to him as a ministry gift? Why would this bother him remotely? In fact, it's the truth. And the reason being is because it was truth being proclaimed, but the source was illegal, and it was serving as a medium to really fill the coffers of two individuals that had no heart for the things of God. And interestingly, when I say these two individuals, I'm just using this generically in the context of the individuals that the young damsel was joined to. Now, let me say, well, what does this have to do with prayer? Notice they were on their way to prayer, and then this spirit of divination met them, and then it began to follow them for many days and brought grief to the prayer initiatives that Paul and Silas were actually launching in the territory of Philippi. Now, interestingly, the word divination comes from a Greek word called putho. This is where you get the English word python from. And by analogy, it speaks of a diviner or a soothsayer. And we know that a python is a constricting serpent or snake, and it kills its prey through asphyxiation. In other words, it chokes them to death. And a python, once again, is a constrictor. When it wraps around an individual, it has the ability to suffocate them, to crush structure, sometimes even break bones. When you look at some of these snakes that can grow as large as 6-7 meters in certain parts of the world, and they can swallow down entire just a large cattle that could weigh thousands of pounds, and this thing can wrap around a cattle, crush its structure, and then swallow it down whole. And sometimes in the mandate of intercession, when you really have a charge from God to break a territory open, you will be confronted by territorial powers. And there are a lot of believers who really have a heart to pray, really want to be able to break through. And sometimes the thing that will slow down your progression, that will stop your course of natural development as an heir of the kingdom, could in fact be a spiritual force working behind the scenes that you simply have not discerned. And so Paul and Silas, an apostolic and prophetic gift, came under the scrutiny of a territorial power that was connected to divination. And this thing brought grief. And interesting, the word grieved from Acts chapter 16 and verse number 18, in the Greek, it means to exert oneself, to be troubled, displeased, to strive and manage with pain. I don't know about you, but I have gone through seasons of developing and growing in prayer and leading the charge in prayer, that going to corporate prayer was actually painful. We were dealing with territorial powers that in fact wanted to restrict our growth, slow down our development, and to stop us altogether, to make us shrink. And unfortunately, due to a lack of maturity and understanding, we didn't know we were dealing with. There were casualties in the context of people not being able to continue with us and actually just stopping coming and participating in corporate prayer altogether. But when you have a burden that comes from God, even with your limited insight and intel, the Spirit of God will release grace for you to continue to push forward. Because sometimes when satanic forces begin to attack a prayer gathering, begin to attack a prayer ministry, begin to attack a prayer team or a prayer leader, one of the goals is to inflict pain. Remember that the thief comes not except but for to kill, steal, and destroy. And as long as the powers of darkness can go undetected, they will continue to inflict pain upon prayer gatherings in the context of impeding your progression or territorial development. And sometimes what they'll use are illegal sources that know how to speak the right thing, but because the source itself for the things that are being proclaimed is illegal, it serves as a gate to actually inflict indifference towards that specific assignment. And once Paul and Silas were incarcerated, of course, this is the continuity of this theme without going through the entire chapter. They still begin to deploy the weapon of prayer. They, as a matter of fact, they began to invoke this pattern. We call the harp and bowl. They begin to praise and pray at midnight, and God deploys an earthquake and destroys the foundation of the prison. And one of the things I found that they had been put inside, and one of the things I found out is that the demon spirit of Python would put local churches into spiritual prisons. It impede, especially when these local churches have territorial mandates and territorial anointings. You can look and see, man, why are some places growing leaps and bounds? And why is it that, these places that have the grace upon them, stamina upon them. We know the power of God is there. What is it, in fact, that is restricting them from growing and developing? And it could be because the territorial powers are not concerned about the things that have swollen and come to massive gatherings because they're no threat spiritually. But sometimes what you'll find is that when you really carry that which is legitimate in the heart and mind of God, there will be powers deployed to make sure you don't grow, to stop your development, to crush your structure, to keep you under constant warfare, to confine you, to incarcerate you, to keep you constantly battling financially, battling in relationships, battling in your leadership, battling in your mind, going through things in your health. And you're wondering why is all this stuff coming? And your only bent is to simply serve God and to do that which pleases him. And sometimes when there's a lack of discernment, Paul was grieved. And after many days, he turns and commands that spirit to come out. And you know that the latter part of it. And out of this, the church of Philippi was actually birthed, of which he writes an epistle to the church of the Philippians. And interestingly, when developing people in prayer, I've learned over the years to really begin to challenge this specific spirit, especially when I discern by the wisdom of God, or there's simply just a divine mandate upon a gathering of people. You have to make it a part of your consistent regimen to attack the demon spirit of Python, because it can produce all kind of trouble, activate all kind of displeasure, have you striving and managing with pain, when Jesus himself, he took our pain and he bore our sickness in his own body, and with his stripes we are healed. And so the combined efforts of praise and worship, along with intercession, are needed to break the spirit of Python. Ministries and ministry gifts, regardless of how anointed they might be, will need this pattern. If you're called to do work that's synonymous with kingdom advancement, you will need this pattern in your lives. And interestingly, I'm going to give you just a few areas with this teaching, and then we'll pray a couple of prayer points to really deal with the spirit of Python, and I'll let you go. Things we've learned over the years. Number one, Python is a conduit for grief and sadness in ministries and ministry gifts alike, often causing believers to merely live with pain and accept struggling as a part of the plan ordained for them. This spirit is bent on wearing the saints out. Now, mind you, let me qualify this statement. This is for apostolic and prophetic ministries in particular that have a bent to advance the kingdom. And we have to really be honest and reckon with the truth that everything that we may look at as far as being ministry is not necessarily concerned about advancing the kingdom, is not necessarily concerned about advancing the vested interests of the King, Christ himself. And this is where you have a myriad of other challenges that can actually come in the context of carnality, but the powers of the territory deem you as no threat. You're not a viable threat. And so they will let you transact with the land because they know that the long-term trajectory of what's happening inside of that specific organization will never culminate into anything to dethrone its existence in that region. And this is why this doesn't make you better than anyone. It doesn't make you less than anyone as well. It simply highlights the significance of your assignment. I know my assignment in the context of spiritual warfare, of advancing the kingdom, of proclaiming the fame of my King, of exalting his banner. And there are powers that are deployed against gatherings like that, ministry gifts in particular, and there is pure hatred towards you. Sometimes there will be infiltration within the assembly, and individuals will come because they're influenced by the powers of the territory to seek to breach that ministry, to sow discord, to activate lust, to stir up all kinds of perversion and uncleanness within the assembly, to defile it so that it becomes unfit for ceremonial duties within that respective grid. And as a result, no longer a viable threat to the powers of darkness. One of the things that really grieves me is that how people who claim to be born again and full of God's spirit don't even want to be remotely spiritual. We put ourselves on a platform with all things carnal. I believe there should be divine distinction. I believe that holiness should at least create some type of earmarks of distinction, not indifference, but distinction, to say, you know, these people really are of God, not just because of what we say, but our orientation, how we govern ourselves, our overall presentation and movements within any respective grid. There should be some marks of distinction. And the demon spirit of Python hates ministries that really give themselves to teach present truth, to lay foundation in that local gathering, to be spiritual, to train and develop people to be Christ-like, and especially partnering with him and his eternal mandate to advance the kingdom of God. And it becomes a real challenge. And so you'll find yourself in constant battles and struggles. And you know that by way of just your inner convictions, you're living right, you're doing right. And what happens is that you'll find a systematic dumbing down of spiritual things. And then eventually we limit ourselves to the basic fundamentals and relegate what we do to user-friendly presentation and never deal with the forces of darkness that in fact incite the hearts of men, that shape policies and laws, and that stir up ancient strongholds to keep people in captivity, and that foster hideous works through the territorial grid where the individuals are actually at. They are territorial powers that are resting over human trafficking. They're territorial powers that are resting over gang activity and organized crime. They're territorial powers that operate with witchcraft and all kind of destructive activity that has certain territorial grids inundated with drug activity, illicit drug activity, and just the funneling, the funneling, let me say this, of illegal transactions to keep people bound by darkness in a specific grid. If Jesus has made us salt and light, and we're to be a city of light that sit upon a hill, my God, when are we going to start seeing some of this stuff where the light begins to make manifest the darkness and break these assignments? And this demon spirit of Python, which was responsible for incarcerating the apostolic and prophetic in Philippi, has incarcerated a lot of well-to-do ministry gifts today whose hearts are geared towards advancing the kingdom. They just don't know perhaps what they're dealing with. Python positions itself to break the structure, government, and momentum of the local church. Many who find it challenging to gain any speed, credible breakthroughs, and sustainable growth are probably dealing with the spirit of Python. I don't care how pragmatic you are. I don't care how excellent your administration is. I don't care how powerful your platform, how much money you have. That stuff means nothing in the realm of darkness. You have to realize that Jesus is the one who legitimizes us to deal with the forces of darkness, not our smart power, our intellect. And trust me, I need all those things to function at optimal levels, excellent administration, all the other stuff that comes along with it. But the challenge is there's a risk that you run of not being spiritual in the context of the Christ call on the Christ calling and Christ commission on your life. I believe that we can have both. I believe that we can really do both. And there are congregations all around the globe that are doing it very well, but we need every church to function like that if we're going to really make some credible gains and begin to redeem territories and generations from the works of darkness. If you find it difficult for credible breakthroughs, sustainable growth, let me say it to you this way. Just this year, our local church, we bought some land in Chicago, and we bought it in a territory that is going through extreme gentrification because we did not want to leave that region. And for years, we had been training the entire globe in prayer, deliverance, the prophetic, apostolic ministry. I mean, I traveled to the nations at least once a quarter for about 10 to 12 years without fail, gain incredible breakthroughs and momentum in other parts of the globe. But in the city of Chicago, it remained very difficult because the approach to ministry was geared directly towards attacking the powers of darkness that were entrenched in the heavens over our city, of which I believe that God is doing something phenomenal these days to really help us break through even greater. I mean, warfare after warfare, fractures in the leadership, heartbreaking because of people who can't understand your real passion and you're conveying this. You're living a transparent life, and you know hell wants to make it all about you. And God was like, man, be quiet with all that. I don't want to hear that stuff. You keep paying the price. Eventually, you're going to break through. It takes time. And as I begin to mature as a man, as a human being, and things that were very intense at one time, just by way of just natural maturity, I started getting a little bit more wise, and grace started increasing as well. But there were years of fighting, and we finally broke through. And just last year, I was ministering in Baltimore at a church that we have there, Kingdom Restorers, with Pastor Angel and Shirley Rosa. And I heard the Lord tell me, he says, son, the powers of darkness in Chicago have deemed you illegitimate in the work you lead because you own nothing. This is one of the reasons why the powers of darkness are fighting you, because once you get land, you now are deemed as a legal entity in that territory. And so we broke through, and we dedicated the land. And now there's been a complete shifting in our ministry, even during the time of a 90-day shelter in place almost. We've had all kinds of just phenomenal things to begin to transpire and manifest for us, saints. And I'm telling you, it took time. It took time, even though we were making credible gains and having a tremendous breakthrough in the nations, from Croatia into Central America, into Europe, different parts of Europe, and then all over the continent of Africa. At home, it was still warfare. At home, it was still a challenge. And finally, we broke through by the grace of God. And now things are looking so much better, but it did not come without a tremendous cost. And the loss of people that I love in ministry, and just the challenges and the fractures in ministry. And then the need for me to humble myself, strengthen the ranks of my marriage. My poor wife, there were times when she felt so dishonored and just disconnected from the work because of demonized individuals, the assaults upon the ministry, the attacks against the kids, other folk you love, and people like, look, deuces, man, I can't handle all this. I ain't cut for this. Let me go find me a place where it's not so intense and it's not so challenging. But the reality is our family prevailed, and we broke through those barriers, and the families that are joined to us are breaking through those barriers as well. And people of God, this is where a lot of well-to-do believers who love God sometimes find themselves in very challenging situations and can't break through because they don't understand that the spirit world is real, and there are forces that operate through people. There are forces that operate through institutions. There are forces, dark powers that operate through systems in the kingdoms of men that want to perpetuate your failure, and they are designed to make sure you never rise except you compromise the word of God and reduce your standard to the wisdom of men. The devil is a liar. There's some people, God is going to renew your fight. He's going to renew your focus. He's going to renew your faith. And there's coming a renewal of fervor inside of you. And you're going to see breakthrough like you have never seen before. The spirit of Python seeks to incarcerate, which is to confine and detain the growth of ministries by minimizing your influence and that of the gifts that are within the assembly. This is done by slowly disengaging people from their assignments through witchcraft and seduction. You have people now where folks will throw money at you to leave your church to come and join the church. That is not the kingdom. That is not the kingdom. That's a spirit of divination. You getting a diviner's fee. That is the way that works. And God disdains this stuff, but behind the scenes, there's this serpent that wants to wrap around a generation and squeeze the life out of it and then swallow it down whole until it exists no more. Well, I'm going to bring this to a close, saints. It's about 8:26 now. We'll pick this up tomorrow and push this revelation just a little bit more, and then we'll spend some time praying as well. I trust that this has blessed you and really prick your interest to take your time of study a little deeper, and to believe God to really give you some fundamental truths that will help serve as a powerful launching pad for you to get into realms of visibility, breakthrough, momentum, and encounter like never before. So may God bless you. Make it a phenomenal day. I'll be on tonight with our executive pastor, Robert Anderson, and we're going to be praying, dealing with iniquity. There'll be just some brief insight that we're going to share collectively, and then we're going to take some time to deal with those twisted things, those perverted things that are creating bents in the hearts of communities and generations to really dishonor life and to disdain the very liberties and freedom that have been wrought for us by God through the crucifixion of Jesus Christ on the cross. That is my job, to reinforce that and to push that narrative. It's an eternal narrative. And so we're going to pray tonight. So look for the live to launch at about 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we'll stream it on Periscope as well. Until then, God bless you. May God unveil this revelation concerning the demon spirit of Python and some of the wicked things it has done to local churches that really are geared towards advancing the kingdom of God. Until then, God bless you, saints. We'll see you tonight at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. God bless you and have a phenomenal day.